Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot. Thank you for being here today. It is July 31st. So, this reading is going to be about Canada. We're going to focus on Trudeau, and we're actually also going to focus on Alberta. So, just a quick update. So, in Canada, there have been just under 116, I guess, thousand cases in total, coast to coast to coast, with a total of under 9,000 deaths. Okay, 9817. So overall, Canada has done relatively well, flattening that curve and getting the coronavirus under control. And frankly, that is in part because we had strong leadership on a federal level and because the premiers of all of the different provinces worked very diligently to not turn this into some sort of a political issue. It was a health issue. That was how it was dealt with. Now, having said that, Alberta, where I reside, we have now ticked up to about 11,000 cases in this province, and we were sitting around 7, 8 for the longest time. And we are actually now at 190 souls in the province of Alberta that have been lost. Now, of course, when you compare that to, kind of what's going on in the United States, I mean, it really does seem, like low numbers. We have about 33 to 35 million people that reside in Canada, in comparison to, what is it, 330,000 plus in the United States. But still in all, we're doing a pretty good job. So I'm going to take a look at federally, the government, and I'm also going to take a quick scan at Alberta and zero in on Jason Kenney, who is causing some concern among some people. Now, having said all of that, after I release this video, there is going to be a second video that I'm going to release, and that one is going to be about Trump and the month of August for him. So I hope you enjoy both of them today, and let us get started, shall we? All right, come on down. Okay, so I have a question, and we're going to start with kind of what's going on in Canada right now and what we can sort of piece together. Here we go. Create a little bit more space here. Right. Trudeau, Federal Canada. Trudeau, Federal Canada. Trudeau, Federal Canada. Okay, so you've got the Chariot coming out first, so, moving ahead. Okay, so, at this point, it looks like Canada is pretty much going to continue forward on the kind of trajectory, if you will, that it has been on. It's going to be slow and steady, but and that's everything. That's not only the coronavirus, that has to do with the economy recovering, that has to do with unemployment. For Canadians, the benefits that have been put out by the Trudeau government have been frankly extensive. And if I have my facts right, they're planning on going through till the end of the year. So that gives Canadians, a fairly good chunk of time since this started in March, to kind of try to almost like acclimate to the new reality that we live in. And that movement forward is simply going to continue. And you know what? This is the thing. Whether you like Trudeau or you don't like Trudeau, whether you're a liberal or conservative or an NDP, the reality is that the federal government, working with the provincial governments has done a really good job of sort of managing this and getting this under control. Even in Ontario and Quebec, where there were like some really significant numbers in terms of cases, they were the two areas that really got hit the hardest. Um, they have really like clamped down. In fact, it's just now that is sort of some of the areas in Ontario that were hardest hit, they're just now starting their reopening process. So there's definitely, recovery. All right. Now, does that mean that, we're out of the woods and it's all great? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Of course, there has been loss, there has been tragedy. And as a nation, we absorb the impact of that. But we do have to talk about, the strength of Canadians and the strength of the response. For most of you, you probably know already, but, we have all of the PPE equipment and the testing equipment, by and large, being manufactured here in Canada. And so, again, that has really been tremendously helpful because, we're sort of not beholden to any other country, and we're not in competition with any other country. So those are all really, really, good things that frankly are in, the favor of Canadians and their recovery. So I want to touch base a little bit on, let's take a look at what's going on right now and Trudeau and this sort of controversy over the We charity. So this is a charity organization that was sort of set up to kind of steer through or guide through, be utilized for creating a really strong kind of volunteer situation so that it could get sort of the younger people out in, getting experience and that kind of thing. And there was, monetary remuneration for that. And now, so Trudeau's mom, Margaret, and his wife, Sophie, have both had speaking engagements with this charity. And it has gotten blown crazy out of proportion. And the thing is, so they're holding hearings and whatever. So on Wednesday, they had the two brothers whose organization it is, testifying. And I guess the Conservatives didn't like what they were saying, which was basically, there was nothing kind of untowards going on. And they immediately started calling for a second investigation. They haven't even finished the first one. So there was a purpose behind this. There was a political purpose. They're trying to cloud the issue. They're trying to put the federal government, and in particular Trudeau, on the defense. But the reality is, the facts are the facts and the truth is the truth. And that doesn't mean the Conservatives are going to back off, because of course they're not going to. But there's definitely a sense that ultimately, when all of the facts are laid out there, the only people who are going to really have a problem with the information and in terms of accepting it are simply going to be people who hate Trudeau and people who don't like liberal policies. But he ultimately is going to, it's not that he's going to escape this thing unscathed, but it definitely, the longer this goes on and the more information that comes out, it really does feel like it's going to sort of start backfiring on those who are really, really calling for this sort of, real clamping down and investigation after investigation. It reminds me sort of the whole helicopter thing. And I don't remember when that was, a couple Christmases ago. And his godfather, and I don't know who his godfather is, I don't remember, but he's a well-known, connected, wealthy man who lives on an island. and the Trudeau family was invited there for the Christmas season or like that. And in order to get from the mainland to his island, they were carried by helicopter. This gentleman's like private helicopters could get them from the land over the ocean to the other land. And everybody caused such a stink about it. I mean, come on, people. Logically, what was he supposed to do? Row a boat? Like, come on. So, there's that kind of nonsense going on, but ultimately, it really just makes the people who are, behaving this way look kind of a little foolish. So, and you can see by the way these cards are coming out, right? You have the Hierophant and the Emperor in the center position being really strong. But on either side, you have like the Three of Pentacles and the Five of Pentacles. You've got the Four of Swords here. So this is going to set the Liberal government back a bit, and this is going to set, Trudeau back a bit. He is losing a little bit in popularity. But I'm here to tell you, it looks like that is going to be recoverable. And part of the reason is because as we gear up, we're sort of in a lull right now, and we're well aware of the fact that there is going to be another surge in the fall. And once again, it really feels as if the federal government is going to handle this, and they're going to handle it with the same care and consideration that they've handled the first wave. And so ultimately, it looks as if he sort of rebounds and gains his strength. Do I think that ultimately he is going to be reelected for a third term? It's a little too early, but I don't think so. I think that as of right now, in any case, it feels as if there's sort of, some stuff that's going to distract or get in the way, but these are early days yet. And the other thing, it was interesting because when I was, pre-shuffling the cards before I started to record, and I was focusing in on the name Justin Trudeau, and I kept hearing, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So for those of you who don't know, that was his father. Trudeau Sr. actually was Prime Minister of Canada 2 separate times. He was very, very pivotal and influential. I believe it was in the 70s. And you got to think, okay, first of all, this little boy, Justin, was, at his father's knee learning politics because the Justin kids were all born while his father was in office as prime minister. So, first of all, this is a kid who grew up in that atmosphere. He grew up around the power brokers, and he is probably far more politically savvy than a lot of people give him credit for. And for any of you who don't think that Daddy Trudeau is not kind of over his shoulder watching out for his son, you would be sadly mistaken. So, you can't count him out because you can't count him out. He has a whole lot more behind him, I think, than people sometimes realize. Now, this sort of indicates that there may be yet something else coming out down the pike that he is going to have to try to recover from yet again. Now, I don't know if this has something to do with sort of the running of the government or some sort of a scandal within the Liberal Party, or whether there is, with the second wave of COVID, if something comes up. But it's going to not be a cakewalk. And I mean, come on, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Of course, it's not going to be a cakewalk. But it looks as if they're going to be fighting some significant challenges. But every time they get one of these kinds of cards, they get a really strong positive card talking about, finding the balance, understanding the truth, moving forward. So I guess for right now, there's not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, it looks like for now, they're going to move forward. They're going to hold their place. And ultimately, governments are going to have to come together when that second wave hits. And given what I'm seeing, it certainly looks like that's exactly what they're going to do. Trudeau has a way of, and maybe it's because he's an indigo. but he has a way of being very sort of inclusive and nurturing and empathetic and sympathetic. He is firm when he has to be, but when he doesn't have to be, he really does. Again, I'll repeat this. For those of you who didn't hear or weren't watching the daily press briefings that he was doing. And the way they did it here in Canada for our neighbors to the south and all of my viewers in other places, he would come out and make like a 20-minute update. This is what the government is doing. This is what's going on. And then that would be followed by a separate, address by the federal health ministers, and then that would be followed by health addresses by the premiers and health officials of every single province, and they were sort of staggered so that generally speaking, you could sit there all day and watch this stuff if you had a mind to. But he typically started every one of his good morning speeches on the COVID literally by saying, I know this is hard. We really appreciate the sacrifices everybody is making. And you know what? Everybody's being really responsible. And when you get told that day after day after day, it encourages you, of course, to continue on the path you're on. And frankly, kind of stamp out the, people here and there who were screaming about having to wear masks and that kind of stuff. Because let's face it, Trump has definitely had an impact, although to a lesser degree, of course, on conservative parties, because they're starting to think that his way is the best way. And speaking of that sort of attitude, well, let's move on to Alberta and Jason Kenney. So as of right now, it looks like the schools are going to be returning to some sort of, I think it's a combination of in class and then remote. So, at home kind of by computer with your class and your teachers, that kind of thing. But, not unlike someone who we know from the South, he's also squawking about, listen, the schools have enough money to do this, and there's not really need for us to do anything else. He's trying to push, and in fact, just recently put a bill through allowing for like private surgical kind of stuff to be allowed. And that's just not something allowed here in Alberta. And that's just not something that as Canadians overall, we think is necessary, because our healthcare, of course, is universal. And so why should there be people who can afford it getting priority service, that kind of thing? So he is starting to lose some popularity. Now, I don't know if that's going to hold. I think when kids go back to school, and if there are some serious outbreaks and the government, the provincial government, has not prepared things appropriately and carefully enough, there is going to be some backlash. So let's take a look at these cards and see what we can find out about the province of Alberta and Premier Kenney in specifically. So Kenney, Alberta government. Kenney, Alberta government. Kenney, Alberta government. Let's take a look and see what we can find. Yeah, he's really big on sort of talking about, the burden and balancing the budget and, that kind of stuff. I have to tell you, though, it's not going to play well. Of course, there are people who want to get back to work, of course. And of course, there are people, frankly, who would really like to see their kids back in school, of course. But when you're in the middle of something and you start really talking about, well, this is going to cost, and you're going to be paying for this forever, and, we have to get things up and running. Who does that sound like? Here, not surprisingly, Trump shows up in the Fool card when we're talking about Kenney. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't work well. And even though, we've had only, and I don't say that in that way to minimize the souls that have been lost, but we've lost under 200 people, 190 in this province. So it's not been like devastating, but that doesn't mean that all of those people weren't off of work and remain off of work. And it doesn't mean that you can just all of a sudden say, well, listen, we weren't hit that bad. And look, and listen, that's what happened. He started talking about this stuff and the numbers started going up. So clearly there's a little bit of a disconnect between him and the people of the province. It's as if he is looking in one direction and the rest of us are kind of going, wait a minute, you need to focus on what's going on right here and right now. And never mind about trying to balance some budget or trying to figure out how you're going to hit us up to pay for it where we're in the middle of it. So it feels as if he is going to continue to get some real pushback because, frankly, unlike his buddy to the south, he really is there are times that he really sounds a wee little bit tone deaf. So I anticipate that he is going to continue to get some pushback, and Rachel Notley, who is the leader of the NDP party here in Alberta, is like a cute little street fighter. I mean, she doesn't put up with no crap from nobody, and she is pushing back. And certainly in the area that I live in, I live just outside of the capital of Alberta, Edmonton. She has stronger support. In Calgary, the major southern city, he is still holding fairly strong. But you have to remember that Calgary is part of where the oil industry is based, like the head offices and that. And so, of course, they're more interested in just getting everything up and running. So it looks like he's going to be continuing to have a little bit of a rough ride. And this is the thing, if he tries to come off as sort of a ruler, a really tough guy, it's not going to work for him. If he backs down a little bit and pulls out kind of the compassion, the logic, the common sense solutions or narratives, he actually could strengthen his position. For those of you who don't like Kenney, I'm sorry to say that, but I call them like I see them here. So definitely there is a sense that it's interesting, right? Because it's like you get a couple of good cards. This is not unlike what happened with the Canadian reading I just did like 2 minutes ago. You get a couple of really good cards, and then there are all these retreat cards and lost cards and kind of yeah, cards where things are not looking like they're going very well. And so I guess I would have to say, based on these cards, it definitely looks as if he's in for a bit of a rough road. I think Alberta, the province, is going to come through this not unscathed, but in relatively good shape. We are Alberta strong out here, and we come together and we band together to help the greater good. Okay. For those of you who don't know, a few years ago we had those really horrendous forest fires north in Fort McMurray, and like the town was burning, and literally there were people, especially in Edmonton and kind of the areas between Fort McMurray and Edmonton. People were literally posting stuff and saying, if you need a place to stay, I have a spare bedroom. That's sort of how we react to things. It's just this kind of open door. What do we need to do to make this work? Because of that, you're getting a really good response, for example, in terms of, social distancing and and wearing masks, etc. Edmonton, because of the uptick in cases in Alberta, I don't know if Calgary's already mandated this or not, but as of August 1st, masks are going to be mandatory in all inside buildings. But again, I mean, we're heading into August here, and it's taken, this sort of amount of time for it really needing to be clamped down on, because by and large, people were just doing the right thing. And so, there is strength within the province. I think that's what I'm trying to say. The people make the province strong. And you also need to remember that ultimately, there is going to be balance, whether that happens with a newly elected provincial government or there's enough pushback that he backs off a little bit. I'm not sure, but it looks as if, generally speaking, the province is going to have a fairly good shot kind of at recovery. So that is sort of good news there. All right. So thank you for sharing with me this Canadian perspective and Canadian video. Again, thank you so much for your support. It's wonderful. For those of you who might be interested in a private reading, there's information in the box below. And for those of you who do not know and perhaps might enjoy a little bit of a more spiritual, a more centered information coming at you, please feel free. I invite you to hop over to my Soulprint Insights channel. There's meditations there, and of course we do the positive energy circle on both of my channels that gets released on Sunday. So we're trying to create a balance here where we're staying aware, but we're also not losing our own center. Okay, so when you finished watching this one, take a look at the one about Trump in August, because that's coming up next. Take good care. Be well. Until next time, bye-bye.